So today we're going to talk about supplements. We're going to look at provide a pretest. Why lecture about supplements? Do I need supplements? Supplement framework, assessing evidence, recommendations, adverse effects, the decision tree, and a summary of what we talked about today. And here's a picture of the hierarchy of nutrition and our cake analogy. Remember, the cake is, meeting the caloric needs, the micronutrients, and then the sprinkles are the supplements, right? It's the added little stuff that just makes it a little bit nicer, right? But it's not the whole cake, right? It's just the sprinkles. So let's get back to the case study. We'll talk about that in class. And so how much do you think supplements can improve an athlete's performance? So the diagram on the right is by Tim Noakes. He's a famous scientist as well from South Africa. And he made this diagram or this information that supplements, nutrition, is really a small percentage of improving sport performance, especially in like endurance exercise, over 3 hours, and that the main thing is really the training, right? That just kind of gives you some context about how supplements can improve an athlete's performance. So another question or pretest is, are these supplements? Is Gatorade considered a supplement? Is orange juice a supplement? How about this emergency, right? So like this big vitamin C amounts that helps prevent you getting a cold and stuff. Has anybody taken that? And are these considered supplements? What are they? Now we're talking about why are we talking about supplements? So first off, I'm going to ask you, do you take a supplement? Why do you take it, or why don't you? And I'll ask you that during class, and we can have a little discussion about that. I think that'd be really fun to do. Another question is, if we know that supplements are, can be banned, they can cause toxicities, side effects. Most sports nutritionists, especially in the past, they would kind of just disregard supplementation. So if the athletes ask like, "Hey, should I take this, this, and this?" they would just say no, no, no. They wouldn't even look at the supplement. They wouldn't even they would totally disregard that athlete and whatever they're asking. And it's just like no, right? Do you agree with this? Why or why not? And I'll ask that in class. I think that's really important as well. So again, we're talking about the cake. I have to always emphasize that the most important part, especially in sports nutrition, is trying to focus on food first, making a good cake, right? The cake is the calories, making sure you're having adequate caloric intake, a balanced diet, you know. Again, it can be small, but can be a significant contribution in their performance and overall health. It's safe, it's cheaper, tastes better in general, and there's many other health benefits when you're eating real food, quote unquote. And of course, number one thing that most athletes or most people want to really zoom in are those finishing touches, the ancillary parts, the sprinkles, right? The things that look pretty, or like the magical pill that can take him to the next level. Without doing much work, I just take this and I can do 10 times as much as I used to before, right? They're looking for something quick overnight, and we all know that any significant change, any real benefit in the long term is because of the cake, of doing the work day in and day out. It's not just overnight magically happens. All right, so supplements, they may provide minor improvements, but it can be critical, especially in high-end elite athletes, right? Even if it's like 0.01 seconds or half a percent, right? It can still be the difference between first place and second. So it is important. And then you also want to really respect the interest of the athlete, right? Just by disregarding or totally ignoring their question, how would that make you feel, right? If you went to a doctor and they're like, oh, no, right? That wouldn't really be in your best interest, and you wouldn't want to see that provider again. right? So you need to address their concerns, understand where they're coming from, and you should have a background or some information regarding that supplement and its usage. In addition, marketing is really strong, right? Peer pressure, competition. So if you see other people take, so if you go to the gym and like everybody's taking protein and you're not taking protein, what ends up happening is like if your friends do it, your competition is like, oh my god, I might be missing out. I got to do it, right? You don't even know why, but you're just doing it just to fit in. That's really important to understand too. But again, you really want to just start from the bottom up. Just make sure that you have the cake first. That's all completed before you start moving up to like sports nutrition, nutrient distribution, timing, and then of course the sprinkles, the supplements. So what is the prevalence of supplementation? About 50% of adult US population consumes some type of supplement. And this is from NHANES 1994 to 2014. And I guarantee it's even higher than that now. And then in athletes is even significantly much more. In youths, international athletes, they had shown about 82% have some supplementation use. In Division One NCAA, about 89% of athletes reported taking at least one supplement. So this did not differ between males and females. However, there was a difference between what kind of supplement they took. Can you guys and ladies guess which supplements females took more of and which one males took more of? And I'll ask that in class. Also, there's been many surveys, and you can look through the scientific journals and articles. They usually have surveys of athletes and what they report on supplementation. And it's been shown that there's varied use across different sports. So depending on the sport, there could be more or less. And you can just assume like if you're playing football, there's going to be a lot more protein use, creatine use, things of that nature. So knowing that is important, especially if you work in those kind of sports. An increase with level of training, performance. There's been increased use of supplementation as well, and there's an increase with age. So as you get older, from youth to adolescence to adult, there's been an increase in supplementation use as well. Even though we said that females and males are similar, there are a slightly higher prevalence in general in males versus females, and it can also be influenced by cultural norms. So where you're coming from can play a role as well. How about athlete rationale? What do you think goes in the mind of an athlete? Why would they want to take supplements? I don't ask that in class, but I think it's going to show anyway. These are some ideas, and if you guys can think of some other ones as well, that'd be great. So perhaps it's to correct nutritional deficiencies. It can be a convenient source of energy and nutrition around an exercise session. May provide a performance benefit during competition, right? Either directly or indirectly. Perhaps there's financial gain. So if you get to that kind of level, please remember me. So sponsorship, right? Or you can get some of the supplements for free, and that's really cool too. Perhaps some athletes think it's a just-in-case policy. And again, like what we said before, if everybody's using it, you want to use it too, right? Or you believe that there's an edge to it and you don't want to miss out, so you end up taking it. So the next question is, does my athlete need a supplement? Does your athlete need a supplement? And is supplementation needed to perform at their best? Is that true or is that false? Let's figure that out. So we need a framework. So a framework helps to help break down all these millions and millions of supplements in the marketplace. You need to find out what works, what doesn't, which supplement can possibly be beneficial for your athlete. And that's really important under what context. So you can't just have a broad statement saying creatine works for everyone in every sport in every position, right? Because there's always these nuances where it may not work, even in the same sport. So it's important to know your athlete's sport, their position, and what kind of specific protocol you should try to follow. Also, the framework can help define and categorize a variety of characteristics, such as regulatory definition, mode of action, form, and function. So, what is supplement? Um, so we talked about that, or we will talk about it in class, but it also depends on who you ask. If you ask your professor, it might be different from your coach, it can be different from athlete to athlete, to even sports nutritionists themselves. And it's also different regarding different government regulating agencies, such as WHO, World Health Organization, USADA, um, government sport agencies, right? Because there's a lot of different sport agencies out there, like the IOC, so the International Olympic Committee, NCAA, so that's like your collegiate sports, NBA, NFL, MMA, right? UFC. There's so many different ones, so you really need to know what governing sport agency is for your athlete. So everybody knows the 1994 DSHEA, right? What's a supplement? So the USDA and FDA define it as a product other than tobacco intended to supplement the diet that bears or contains one or more of the following dietary ingredients: a vitamin, a mineral, a herb or other botanical, an amino acid, a dietary substance for use by man to supplement the diet by increasing the total dietary intake, or a concentrate metabolite, constituent, extract, or a combination of any ingredients described previously. So, what did I just say? Does anybody know? So you may need to read that a couple of times before it kind of gets into your head, but it kind of means like almost anything, right? Anything that has a vitamin or a mineral or a botanical or herb or amino acid, or any dietary substance used to increase the total dietary intake of something. It's quite general. So let's see what else this means. So we also have different sport agencies, like we said before. So the IOC or WADA, they define supplements as a food or food component, nutrient, or non-food compound that is purposefully ingested in addition to the habitually consumed diet with the aim of achieving a specific health and or performance benefit. And supplements can come in many forms, including the following: functional foods, foods enriched with additional nutrients or components outside their typical nutrient composition, such as mineral fortified or vitamin fortified, as well as nutrient enriched foods. So that could be like milk with vitamin D. All right, it could be like orange juice that has calcium, vitamin D as well. That's a enriched food. Formulated foods and sports foods, providing energy and nutrients in a more convenient form than normal foods for general nutrition support, such as liquid meal replacements, or sports drinks, gels, and bars. So if you're drinking Gatorade, that would be considered a supplement, right? Or nutritional gels that we talked about, or nutrition bars, right? That's also considered a supplement, according to the IOC. Single nutrients and other components of foods or herbal products provided in isolated or concentrated forms. So such as the emergency multi-ingredient product containing various combinations of those described above. So it really encompasses a large variety. So it's not just like your protein supplements, right? It can be like Gatorade, it can be like the fortified foods. So supplements are a much larger range and variety than you may normally think of. So what is a supplement form? So they can come in many different forms. Historically, pills and powders, they were considered really risky because you didn't know what was in there. And then drinks like Gatorade, you'd be like, oh, that's more trustworthy. Bars, right? Like Cliff bars, they're like, oh, that's pretty healthy. People eat that all the time. But it's getting very skewed. All right, the products are becoming more blurred, and what you normally would think would be safe. You can buy like these kind of drinks like Wired or like Red Bull at your local bodega or supermarket, and they can be kind of dangerous, right? Maybe not healthy at all. So there's a lot of blurred lines. Also, availability, where it's sourced, is important. And back in the days, or, or I say pre-COVID, right? Most people would just go to like GNC or Walmart or whatnot to pick up like their supplements, like Vitamin World or GNC. I don't know if they're still open, but most people now, they're going to get it delivered in general, right? They're going to go through Amazon or some kind of Alibaba or whatever. Uh, but it's generally more risky, right? When you're getting internet or mail order, but that's where we're moving toward. So really knowing where you're getting your source, where is it coming from, is really, really important, because it can be very dangerous, right? So it's important to have supervision or oversight of where you're getting your stuff from. Again, distinctions are becoming more blurred, and it's becoming more and more difficult. Function. So supplements can also be broken down by function. A lot of times they are marketed for either weight loss, weight gain, recovery, fuel support, illness prevention. And there's many different ingredients with varying ability to achieve that claim. And it's difficult, if not impossible, to judge efficacy due to non-regulation and enforcements of claims. So remember, in America, no one really checks on these supplements, right? And I think we're going to talk about that coming up soon. So just be aware of that. Like, it's not really regulated well or at all. So here's another case study question that you guys should be thinking about. So Mark, a recreational weightlifter, comes to you and asks if taking this 3 times a day is okay. He wants to gain some mass, right? He's starting to work out. He wants to get muscular, like other guys at the gym. He wants to be like them, and he's just starting out. So what would you say? He wants to take this serious mass supplement, and attached is the supplemental facts and directions. Say to begin with half a serving daily for the first week, and then gradually increase to 1 or more full servings several times a day. So you would have maybe 3 times or something. He's saying. What do you think? Also, if you look at the supplement facts, where are most of the calories coming from? Can anyone tell me about that? And also, how do we gain mass? What's the most important part? And now we're going to talk about assessing the evidence for supplements. There's different levels of evidence. It can be well supported with evidence-based research. It can have equivocal support, or it can have minimal scientific support, just a lot of observational or opinions. Don't forget that evidence is dynamic, right? It can always change. It's only based on the most current research today, right? What tomorrow brings may challenge that current thought, right? Newer studies may change previous theories, evidence linked to specific use versus universal approach. So assessing the evidence for supplements, again, is very difficult to say, because everybody's general diet is kind of different, right? And their training is different, and there's also all those other pieces of the puzzle that can lead to that outcome. So it's very hard or difficult to have a study just focusing on that one supplement, and then of course that specific population. It's just a lot. It's just really difficult. So there's a range of applications, and it depends on what your athlete may be looking for using the supplement for. So again, to correct a deficiency, so the ability to prevent or treat suboptimal nutritional status, or perhaps it may be used as a limiter to performance or improve performance or homeostasis, such as fueling for the muscle or brain, so like sport gels, carbohydrates for endurance athletes, or trying to maintain homeostasis, such as replacing fluids, electrolytes such as sodium, or it can be performance enhancing. And I think that's what most people think of when they think of supplements or they hear the word supplements. However, there are very few validated supplements. And it's just because it's very hard, right? There's so many different supplements out there. And it costs money. It takes time, especially if you have really good researchers. They're not going to test like every supplement. It takes lots and lots of time. You got to have participants. You need to have, you know, it's just a lot of work. And the only time you're actually going to see a specific supplement by a specific brand, again, is if that company is paying for it. And if that company is paying for it, you're likely going to have a little bit of a bias, right? Because if the researchers are the people that's paying your paycheck, it's kind of hard to say negative things, right? You're not going to do that. So hierarchy of evidence, there's weak evidence, so anecdotal, observational. They may have a good like hypothetical explanation or mechanism of action, but what happens in the real world, they may have lacking in evidence. So it may sound good, but doesn't really connect. Stronger evidence or really good evidence that you want to look for are stuff that have like systematic reviews and meta-analysis. These are the really strong stuff that you're looking for. It's like a summary statement of many studies that have been looking at a certain supplement. However, a con is that it's a reflection of current studies. And again, like we said before, it can always change and it can be influenced by the study design, inclusion exclusion criteria. So anybody that's doing the extra credit, that's really important to know and to look at, right? Because that will tell you if it's good for your client or your athlete, and maybe some flaws of the study, like what's lacking, something's a little off, or it's really important to know the study design. So here is from Louise Burke's consensus statement on the hierarchy of scientific evidence or evidence matrix for performance supplements. And if you go from the bottom up, so this isn't like the nutrition pyramid, like where you want to have a lot of the bottom stuff. It's not saying that. It's saying like you kind of want more stuff from the top. So meta-analysis, systematic reviews, randomized control trials. You want to have more of that stuff to really provide evidence for a supplement. So I think a lot of people, you see the biggest guy at the gym, and they're like, you always see them like at the locker room, and they're having their protein supplements or whatever. I don't even know what they're drinking sometimes, but they always have it. And it's like, do you even supplement, bro? Like, bro, you have to try X, Y, and Z supplement. I'm so swole, I swear by it. It works for me, so it'll work for you. What kind of evidence is this? Is this considered a strong or weak evidence? And then compare it to real life too, like psychologically or mentally. If somebody said that to you, if you're really a newbie or a novice weightlifter and you saw like some really big muscular guy, you look up to him, you're like this really works, how would that kind of affect you? We can talk about that in class. So again, hierarchy of evidence, the gold standards are like prospective, double-blind, random controlled studies, and they should have, a strong study should include adequate sample size, right? So if the sample size is, n equals 3, is that good or bad? What do you think? It's good if you're one of those 3, right? Make sure you're not an outlier. Is it appropriate sample characteristics of your athlete, right? Is it specific to their event, their sport? So if the study's about marathon runners, but your runner is a 100-meter specialist, would that really be a smart study to compare your athlete to? No, right? So there's different sports, different characteristics, soccer, triathlon, UFC, weightlifting, whatever you want to be really specific to that sport. And also you want to mimic the race and competition condition, right? So sometimes the outcome of the study is looking at total time to exhaustion versus time trial. If a 100-meter runner was looking at the study, would you look at total time to exhaustion or time trial? Which one's more predictive for them? What do you think? And again, you have to also look at the conditions that the study was done in, their temperature, humidity, and their diet. And that's super important, to look at your diet as well. A lot of studies, they leave that out sometimes. Would that be a good idea or a bad idea? Standardization of variables. Also, the standardization of variables is important. So like what we talked about before, the diet, was it controlled? Especially if you're looking for a nutritional intervention. If you don't have diet controlled, then that's a major flaw. Also, other variables such as training. So if you're saying, oh, they got better because of diet, but there's also a difference in training variables, that is super important to know, because then it might not be the diet, it could have been training variable. Also, who is your sample, right? Are they looking at novice athletes or elite athletes or recreational? Because again, most of the time, most studies are just looking at collegiate males, right? So if your athlete is elite, there's very few or rare studies that use elite athletes. And especially if your athlete's elite, they may not be, the results may not be applicable to them, right? Because they're a totally different breed. So you need to know that as well. So you got to make sure, does the study match closely to your athlete? And again, I'm going to ask you this question, why is that important? And most likely that would be a great question to ask in an exam. Alright, so the study should have a protocol for the supplement use, right? Telling you which specific product was used, how much was used, how often, the timing, that's super important to know, right? Was it an hour before, 30 minutes in before, 2 hours before? Was it 1 milligram, 2 milligrams, 500 mil? Like, those things should be spelled out. Also, there's independent verification of supplements, right, to ensure that there's integrity of the supplement, to also make sure that it's unadulterated and avoid inadvertent doping, right? So there's like USP, and there's other companies that kind of verify the supplement, but just because it's verified, again, doesn't necessarily mean it's unadulterated. Also, verification of intake. So it should also be shown in the muscle or blood or urine. Somewhere should have evidence that the supplement is getting absorbed. Okay. Performance protocol. The measure is valid and reliable performance outcome. And also to report any limitations to the study design and practical recommendations. So again, studies do not provide an exact definitive answer for your specific athlete, and we said that last class, right? Studies don't give you a clear-cut answer, right? It gives you kind of guidelines, kind of gives you suggestions or recommendations, and it's up to you to kind of just mold that. Sorry about that. Recommendation for your athlete. Again, one study by itself is not strong. It's not good enough. Okay, it needs to be reproducible. Because one study could be one-off. Maybe I don't know, for some strange reason, those athletes had that outcome, but when you try to reproduce it, it just never shows up again. Again, it depends on the event conditions, the specific individual. So there's also a lot of variability, individual variance, I would say. Some may have side effects, GI issues. So even though it may be shown to be really useful to the general population, maybe your athlete cannot handle it, right? Maybe this doesn't work. There's always outliers, or maybe even your athlete is an outlier. And there's also a combination of other performance strategies. Remember, nutrition is just one piece, and then supplements is just one piece of that one piece, right? So there's many pieces to the puzzle for performance outcomes or output, and nutrition is just one of them, right? There's training, their entire diet, other supplements, and other interventions, right? So what are some other important interventions? I'll ask that in class. That's important for performance. So supplements, they can be used to address nutritional deficiencies. And we said that in the last class that in clinical deficiencies, supplementation can actually have measurable impact on performance, right? So if the person is clinically deficient, there is definitely a performance impact with nutritional supplementation. That makes sense, right? Especially in those like with iron deficiency, anemia, really low vitamin D levels, and bone health. However, as we said before, subclinical deficiency, so it doesn't really show in blood work, perhaps not like clinical where it's physically measurable. It may not show measurable performance improvements. It's hard to assess, but even as though it's hard to assess, does that mean we should not bother with it? Should we not care? Like, okay, it's a little bit low. Should we not address it? What do you guys and girls think? And again, there's difficulty in knowing what's normal and what's optimal, right? And as athletes, as like especially if they're performance geared, they want optimal, not just okay, right? But there's a good balance between optimal and excessive, right? And I think that's a lot of times when athletes, they always want more is better, a lot more is even a lot more better, and it's not like that. And that's where we come in again to try to help the athletes understand that, right? More is not better. So another question, why don't we just take a daily multivitamin and then, that hits like 100% and call it a day? We just take the Centrum and we're good. We don't need to go through this chapter anymore. That's another question I'll ask in class. Nutritional assessment. So in order to understand more, we have to address the root problem that led to that deficiency. And we're going to do nutrition assessment, diagnosis, intervention, monitoring, and evaluation in like 2 or 3 classes later. So we're going to get into more detail about that. But just to give you some basics, so we got to address the root problem. And then supplementation or dietary changes can be needed or used to bring that level to within normal levels. However, there can be benefits from acute or chronic supplementation, right? Because it may be so low that diet by itself will not be able to bring it back to normal levels, and having that supplement can just expedite that process faster and prevent any kind of complications. Again, you also want to ensure that they are not at any health risk versus the supplement use, right? So you need to really understand your patient, their patient story, right? If they have any current medications that may interfere, other supplements that may interfere, current health conditions, right? That's really important to know as well. And you also want to make sure to take or obtain a baseline so you can compare future measurements to see if your intervention, supplementation, or dietary changes that you recommended is working. Is it progressing? Is the levels becoming more within range, or is it going lower, right? Do you need to address that, change the intervention, and to figure out why or why not that is. All right, so now we're going to look at the IOC consensus statement, and we're going to look at vitamin and mineral deficiencies. So at table 5 in the consensus statement, I'm just going to look at a few of the supplements that I wanted to address. There's so many, and it would take like a whole class, or it would take the whole semester just going over supplements, or even just one supplement if you really wanted to. So this class again is just a general cursory class that's going to just touch on just a few points, important points in sports nutrition. So we're going to look at vitamin D. We talked about vitamin D, and it's essential fat soluble vitamin, and about what it says 90% of the sources of vitamin D is through skin exposure to sunlight. So if your athlete is not getting enough sunlight because they're working out indoors, or they live in a place that does not have sun, or like we talked about Deena Kastor, she was wearing excessive amounts or using excessive amounts of like sunscreen, a hat, clothing, it just increases the risk for vitamin D deficiency, and deficiencies can cause, as this consistent statement says, 3.6 times higher risk for stress fracture, and supplementation when warranted may reduce this risk. And discrepancies are likely explained by differences in baseline vitamin D concentrations. So again, what does that mean? You have to know where you're starting with, right? If they're normal, would you give vitamin D concentration, right? No, right? You need to know where they're at, and then also to also help with seeing if you're improving and meeting their goals. So here are some other micronutrients that athletes usually supplement with, and you can read that in the class, in the paper. Just note that indiscriminate supplementation with any of the above nutrients is not recommended. Do you understand what that means? Just because it's in this paper doesn't mean like, okay, I see, these micronutrients require supplementation, that means everybody should take it. No, that's not what it's saying. What it's saying is that if there's a deficiency, right, then these supplements, these are the ones that are the higher risk for athletes. And if you went to your provider, through blood work, lab work, right, deficiency was identified, then supplementation or changes in dietary intake can be utilized. All right, so make sure you understand that. You just don't want to, just because 25% of athletes are low in iron doesn't just mean, okay, you need iron, right? You don't want to have a blanket statement like that. So what specific populations are at increased risk for vitamin D deficiency, iron deficiency, calcium deficiency? And are there other populations, at risk for vitamin D deficiency? You can pause and wait a second and think about the answer. So yeah, right, so there's vegans, right? They're really at risk for B12 because why? Actually, class in pregnant population may need higher vitamin intake of like folate and iodine. So what about sports foods? So remember, sports foods provides energy and nutrients, and they're really popular. So if you ever did any kind of like a running race or marathon, Ironman, you probably use some kind of sports nutrition or sports nutrition supplement. So remember we talked about the marathon, right? It's 30 to 60 grams. But when you looked at the consensus statement, the 2016 position stand on nutrition and athletes, we saw that over about 2.5 hours is 90 grams or more. But in real life, those levels are for like elite people. There's a difference, right? For the general population, yes, 30-60 is most likely going to hit 95%. The 90 grams, those are for the higher level, and you have to really train to get to that level. You're not going to start 90 grams right away. You can try it if anybody wants. That can be extra credit if you want to try 2 hours of training and try to see if you can shove 90 grams per hour. That tell me how that goes. I don't think you're gonna like it. So practicality, right? Is that why do people do that then? Why can't we just get it from real food, right? We were saying, Professor Lee said real food first. What's going on? Remember, it's hard. It's hard to carry a bunch of bananas, right? Banana comes in different sizes. Bananas can get squashed. It gets really icky. It's really hard, right? Um, so if you wanted to hit 60 grams, that's what, like 4 bananas an hour. If you wanted 2 hours, that's 8 bananas. You know, how are you gonna carry 8 bananas? Just, and then you're gonna be like bananaed out. You don't want to eat any more bananas. And again, is that the best way to absorb carbohydrates during a higher intensity workout? So preparation, ease of consumption, storage, gut comfort. This is why there's a lot of sports foods, sports nutrition foods, supplements, um, to help meet these challenges, right? It's convenient, so like gels and CES. CES stands for carbohydrate electrolyte solution, so like Gatorade, drinks of that nature. And they also help with standardizing caloric, macro, and micronutrient needs. So if you're looking really for 30 grams, or it's much easier than having a big banana, small banana, half banana. You can't really estimate like that. So in the consensus statement, you know, I'm just going to circle the ones that I think is really cool, interesting and important to know, especially if you're an endurance athlete, right? Sports drinks, sports gels, electrolyte replacement supplements, sports bars. And I'm not saying that protein supplements aren't important or liquid meal supplements aren't important. Just these are a little bit more um, during the race is really important. So what about supplements with good to strong evidence to achieve sports performance, right? This is stuff that I think most people, most athletes are really talking about or thinking about when they hear supplements, okay? And these are the supplements that have pretty strong evidence, pretty good evidence to show its benefit. Um, so what are they? Caffeine, creatine, nitrates or beetroot juice, sodium bicarbonate, beta-alanine, and possibly glycerol. So, you know, you have to check to see if these supplements are effective, legal, and safe for your athlete, right? And again, this is only after meeting the cake, right? After meeting all the adequate daily dietary practice that we talked about before, right? And also, this must be practiced in competition, in a competition-like setting. You must test for individual efficacy. Remember, there's a lot of individual variability. What works for XYZ may not work for your athlete. And finding what is the best protocol for your athlete is important as well. And you also need to weigh the risk of marginal gains. So remember we said that, even if they do work, it's usually going to be marginal or small versus inadvertent contamination. So if you're in a high level where you're being tested frequently, is it worth having a positive test result? All right. If you're a recreational person, then it doesn't, that's not an issue then. But higher levels, it becomes more and more important. So let's look at caffeine. So if you look at the consensus statement, it tells you the overview, its mechanism of action, protocol, performance impact, and other considerations and side effects. So how does caffeine work? So it's an adenosine receptor antagonist, and it increases endorphin release. So what's the mechanism of action? It kind of reduces the perception of exertion. So the RPE is decreased. And that's super duper important to know, right? It just makes things feel easier, right? So if you're doing a hard workout, maybe it's not that hard, maybe it's like moderately hard. And that's a big benefit. So where should we start? What's the recommendation? So it's 3 to 6 milligrams per kilogram of body mass. It can be pill or powder form, consumed an hour before exercise. So is that a lot? 3 to 6 milligrams. All right, so they said it's about like 200 milligrams is 3 milligrams. So if it's 6, that would be 400 milligrams. Is that a lot? What do you think? Well, what's the first question you ask? Like, what does that even mean, right? And that's where you as a dietitian will come in and explain what does 400 milligrams or 200 milligrams look like? What's in a typical caffeinated beverage? And we'll see that later in the lecture. So which specific sports? So it says improve endurance capacity as exercise time to fatigue, activities varying duration from 5 to 150 minutes, across numerous exercise modalities such as cycling, running, rowing, and others. So endurance sports, but also there's short-term supramaximal repeated sprint task has shown some benefits, especially in repeated sprint performances during intermittent team game activity. So what does that mean? That also means like basketball, soccer, right? Because there's repeated sprint performances. Other considerations is more better, right? Larger caffeine doses, so greater than 9. So that's like 600 milligrams. We're getting kind of really large amounts now. Do not appear to increase performance, right? So too much, no good. So does this mean all endurance athletes should use caffeine? Yes or no? And I'll ask that in class. Creatine. So creatine's mechanism of action is that increases creatine stores, augmenting the rate of the phosphate creatine resynthesis. Phosphocreatine resynthesis. So which energy system is that? That should be pretty obvious. So what does it do? How does it impact performance? It can enhance maximum isometric strength and the acute performance of single and repeated bouts of exercise, so less than 150 seconds. Duration, so under like 2 minutes. But usually, again, it's really focusing on single bouts, and most pronounced when the task is less than 30 seconds. So that really shows you which energy system, right? And it says it in its name. So these are some of the sports that would benefit. Sprint, 100-meter sprinters, bodybuilders, football, all positions. Asked that in class. It can also be detrimental for endurance performance or in events where the body mass must be moved against gravity, such as high jump, pole vault, or where athletes must achieve a specific body mass target. So, having that information, which sports would not benefit? And I'll ask that in class as well. Also, I put up in the supplemental material current reviews on creatine supplementation. So there's one on creatine supplementation in women's health. I think that's pretty interesting, right? Because usually, you're only looking at the men's point of view. So I think it's really cool. There's a review about the common questions and misconceptions about creatine supplementation. I think that's really good if you have no idea about creatine supplementation and you want to learn more. And then this one's really cool. It might be a little controversial. Creatine supplementation in children and adolescents. Is this important to know, right? Even if we don't agree, like, whoa, what? Did you just say creatine supplementation in children? That's crazy, right? Why would you read it? Why is it important to know? What do you think? And we talked about that in class. Beetroot juice or nitrates. So nitrate augments exercise performance via an enhanced function of type 2 muscle fibers, a reduced ATP cost of muscle force production, an increased efficiency of mitochondrial respiration, increased blood flow to the muscle, and a decrease in blood flow to VO2 heterogenetics. So, which energy system do you think this is? So supplementation is proposed to enhance type 2 muscle fiber function, resulting in improvement of 3 to 5% of high intensity intermittent team sport exercise of 12 to 40 minutes. So 12 to 40 minutes is where we're looking at submaximal high intensity intermittent short duration efforts. There may exist the potential for GI upset, so that's really important to know, right? So that's why you got to try it before a key performance or a key contest, right? Because you wouldn't really want to have that GI side effect. Also, performance gains appear harder to obtain in highly trained athletes. So in maybe elite athletes, this will not really benefit them. And why do you think that is? You know, talk about that in class as well. So beta alanine, is another supplement. Its mechanism of action is that it is a rate-limiting precursor to the endogenous intracellular buffer carnosine, the immediate defense against proton accumulation in the contracting musculature during exercise. So it's working against proton accumulation, right? The hydrogen ions. Which energy system do you think that is? Performance impact, there's small, so it's 0.2% to maybe 3% benefit. And again, the supplement effectiveness appears harder to realize in well-trained athletes. So, you know, this one, the previous one, most studies, the studies that show benefit has been greater in like recreational versus well-trained. How about sodium bicarbonate? So this works on the pH gradient, all right? Kind of tries to lower the acidicness due to the hydrogen ions during exercise. So performance impact, enhanced performance up to 2% of short-term high-intensity sprints lasting 60 seconds in duration. And the efficacy decreases as time goes over 10 minutes. There is well-established GI distress associated with this supplement. Is that important to know? And there's other strategies to minimize GI upset. You can read that. So, you know, there's a lot of testing. You have to trial, error, see what strategies work, how much. You have to buy the supplement, make sure that supplement is not tainted. So there's a lot of work that goes into figuring out which strategy works best for your athlete, and then, you know, it may not even give you any benefit, or maybe the side effects are so great that, you know, it becomes more of a pain than a gain. So, you know, supplements are too, it is there, but, you know, does it work for your specific athlete? Is it that important? Could the time, you know, trial and error of this could have been done doing something else that would have benefited the athlete even more? All right, because this also costs money, right? If they have a limited budget, could they have used that budget a little better? And the time, could they have used that time instead of like going off, you know, paying a nutritionist to this, you know, break down the supplements? Could the nutritionist have done other things that could have benefited the athlete even more? All right, and the next one is body composition supplements. So we're not going to really go into detail, but you know, there's a large number of supplements out there that state weight gainer, fat burner. However, fat burning supplements lack evidence. There's a lot of evidence. There's no evidence really. Again, a lot of times there's also other contaminants in there which can make it harmful and are considered prohibited in that sport. The main focus in the consensus statement was protein. It really said that, you know, it's effective at promoting lean body mass, especially when dieting or gaining, when combined with what? Yes, resistance exercise. So, you know, you gotta have those two ingredients to really hold on to lean body mass. But also, the other main ingredient that's necessary to increase or decrease body mass is, I in class, So protein, they're recommending 1.6 grams of protein per kilogram per day. The maximum is about 2.2, they say, so 2 grams per kilogram per day, or 2.2, that's like 1 gram per pound. So if your athlete's 150 pounds, it'll be 150 grams maximum. And they say they're trying to split up throughout the day, and we learned that in the protein class, right? We don't want to have it all at once. We want to make sure it's spread out. And they recommend 0.3 to 0.5 grams of protein per kilogram. And they show that it has been consistently effective, especially around time of exercise, especially strength training exercise. Let's see. So what's the protein recommendation for athletes using the 2016 position stand? So boom, 1.2 to 1.7. So it fits right in, right? 1.6. And if you're really trying to gain, I would even say a little bit higher, right? Like closer to 2. Or trying to have more lean body mass. But yeah, this fits right in. And what's the difference? So using the general recommendation for 170 pound, it would be like 19-20 grams per meal, or 3 ounces of a lean protein like chicken, fish, beef. How does that compare to the gaining lean body mass? So it's just a little bit, it's not like humongous, right? You would think that, oh, I need a protein supplement, I need a humongous amount. It's only about like 4, maybe 10 more grams. So just adding like half an ounce to maybe like 2 ounces, it's not like significant. It's not as much as what people think when they think about protein. So losing fat mass, and again, the protein can be from either or, like dietary sources or supplemental proteins. And again, efficacy is that there is a small but significant effect. So what about the adverse effects? So what about the safety of supplements, the composition of supplements, inappropriate mix and match, the amount taken? So you gotta be really careful about that, especially like finding out what your athlete's taking currently. It can cause minor stuff like gas or stomach upset, and more dangerous adverse effects include maybe going to ER, maybe even death. Right, so it's really important to be aware of that, especially the more is better philosophy. Remember that more is not always better, right? Not too much, not too little. You look for just right. So we're gonna look at caffeine. The next slide shows what happened when there was an error in the intake. So greater than 18 grams can be fatal. So I think this was in, what is this, 2017. There were some college students. They're trying to do experiment on exercise, and they're supposed to have 0.3 grams of caffeine or something like that, but they actually gave like 30 grams, and that's a lot, right? That's a lot more. It's, what is this, enough caffeine for 300 cups of coffee. Okay, so one of the subjects, so it was a student, it was hospitalized for 6 days, reported short-term memory loss, and lost 26.5 pounds. The other student was treated for 2 days, intensive care, and lost 22 pounds. So the risk here was death. It should have been, you really got to be careful, right? They went from like 0.3 grams of caffeine, but because they moved the decimal place or they looked at it wrong, could be detrimental, right? Could be deadly. So if researchers can get it wrong, what do you think can happen with athletes and even coaches? Adverse effects, regulations, again, like we said before, supplements in America, they're not really subjected to regulation. There's no stringent regulation process. They don't have to clear everything, make sure like it's all clean and there's no contaminants or anything like that. How does this compare to medications? Also, supplements aren't required to really prove benefits claimed. They're not required to show safety, and they're not required to assure content quality. So in 2015, in the United States, there was about 23,000 ER visits due to complications of supplement use. So why don't we like monitor this more? So there's limited resources. The government doesn't really put much, or just there's so much product out there that's almost impossible unless you have a whole division, like a whole like there's not enough people. So what happens is that people actually get harmed or something has to happen, like a negative, like people die or hospitalized, and then that's when the FDA goes in and like, okay, we can recall the product, right? Such as like hydroxycut when it first came out. Um, you know, it was actually had some detrimental problems, caused deaths, and it had to be reformulated not to have a certain substance. So there can be excessive uses, toxicities, impurities. You can have lead, glass, metal fragments, um, and actually even worse, you can have things that can cause a positive illegal substance. GI upset, right? It can be due to production and storage as well. So other adverse effects include anti-doping rule violations. So who's at risk for this is like elite competitive athletes, right? If use or attempt to use prohibited substance, right? Even if it's unintentional, it can result into a anti-doping violation. And you can look at WADA to see what's prohibited, and that depends on which athletes. So WADA is a World Anti-Doping Agency, and you can see they cover a lot of sports, but not all sports. So what can result? You can lose a medal, lose a record, you can have financial sanctions, temporary or permanent suspension. They can damage your reputation and therefore lose sponsorship and a whole host of things. So what are the causes? So it could be athlete error. Maybe they just, you know, athletes just believe that it's natural. You could buy it at Walmart, so it must be okay. You can buy it on Amazon. But it's not regulated. It's not necessarily natural. It doesn't necessarily mean healthy or good for you, right? Maybe they don't know how to read a food label. I mean, the product label. They don't understand it or confused by chemical names. They know that X, Y, and Z took it, so if he's okay or she's okay, then I should take it. Also, it could be non-athlete error. It could be the supplement itself can contain prohibited substances, contaminants that they did not report. In 2017 study, about 15% of 600 plus supplements contained undeclared contaminants. So how do you reduce the risk? Of course, you can use third-party auditors such as Informed Choice or NSF Certified for Sport. So if you see that on your supplement, it just gives you a little bit more of, safety. Like, okay, at least it was somewhat checked. But again, this still does not guarantee 100% safety. Does not mean 100% there will be no contaminants, right? So you definitely must weigh the cost and benefit. And again, the onus falls on the athlete at the end of the day. Legality. So remember we talked about, is it legal? And it depends on many different things, such as age, the sports authority that's governing that sport that your athlete participates in, the location, country, state. And what does that mean? So I give two examples here. What about marijuana? And I know some students here are going to discuss that in their presentation, which is great. So UFC recently, I think in January of this year, made a significant rule change regarding marijuana that it's not going to be anti-doping substance. However, if you go to NCAA, it's banned. California versus New York. So it's New York. It's illegal in New York, right? New York State. However, lawmakers are looking to legalize it versus California, which allows it. But what about age? So California, if you're under 21, it's illegal. Caffeine, IOC, WADA. Caffeine is okay. Before in the past, in the Olympics, you couldn't really have caffeine. It was restricted, or was it banned? I don't remember. I think it was like limited. But NCAA also is restricted. Doesn't mean you can't have it. It just means it has to be under a certain amount. So it's 15 micrograms. And what about youth or adolescents compared to adults? So adults, of course, caffeine is okay. What about youth? In general, I think the American Pediatric Association, they do not recommend any type of caffeine for youth or adolescents. So again, what's that mean? Know your athlete, know your athlete's sport. And here's caffeine and what's the typical amount. So what can lead to a NCAA violation? So 500 milligrams within 2 to 3 hours of the event. Is it difficult to obtain? So looking at how much caffeine are in typical foods, food substances, you can see. So it's like 3, 4 cups, if you're drinking like 6, 8 ounce cups, then yeah, you can pass it, but that's a lot of coffee, right? In 2 hours. But if you're taking tablets, it can, possibly get over. Supplementation is part of the sports landscape, so it is important to know. So here are some decision trees. Helps to guide informed decisions for nutritional supplemental use. This one's for nutritional deficiency or insufficiency. Any doctor or medical provider or nutritionist can go through it with your athlete. This one's for reducing the risk for anti-doping rule violation during nutritional supplement use, and you guys look at that. And then this is just a little bit easier way of looking at it. What you would ask your athlete, is it safe? Is it legal? Is it effective? And finally, can I afford it, right? And this is from the AIS, or Australian Institute of Sports, and their sports supplement framework. So these are like group A supplements. These are supplements that have strong support. There's evidence, and it tells you the subcategories and examples. And we discussed that in class or in this lecture. So let's get back to the case study. We'll talk about that in class. And finally, summary. Dietary supplements are widespread at all levels of sport as part of the sport landscape. Nutrition assessment should be undertaken before supplementation. Supplements may provide a contribution to performance, however, it is minor. May harm health, may help with performance. Can affect your livelihood. Can lead to poor PR or public relations, doping violation, can't compete, you can lose a lot of money. But then we can also look at the other side of that as well. All risk is upon the athlete, intentional or inadvertent. So it doesn't matter if you did by accident or you did on purpose, you will still, it's still on your onus. There's a variety of reasons for use, right? We talked about that, and results vary. N equals 1. There's a lot of individual variation, and you must practice it in training. All right.